Hi, I'm Tim, and I want to thank Noreen and Kristen and the Center for Fiction and the Jerome Foundation, and welcome to the new fellows. I'm glad you got more money. That's really nice. And hopefully the price keeps growing, and eventually, I'll be like, oh yeah, I remember when I got that, and it was like nothing. And it's been really great to meet the current fellows, and let's get a drink next week and hang out. This is just a little part of an early chapter of my novel, and it's set on a bus. They drove west out of Boston into the Berkshires toward the Appalachians. Father Olafemi tried to sleep, but the sun shone brightly off the snow, and the pain in his hip was constant. Sitting straight was the least agonizing posture. At the rectory, Nurse Chandler Jackson had strapped his legs to an abduction pillow to prevent careless movements, and he felt safer knowing he couldn't kick in his sleep. He wanted now for her to appear at his seat with a tray of ugly food and a green cup of water, sit near him as she had at his bedside, and ramble about her hardships. Her brother Hobie, shot and killed at the age of 16, the family dog found hung from the lamppost a month ago, and the jobless husband she rarely saw. Father Olafemi suspected she stole stories from neighbors. How many dying men had heard her troubles and thought it all seemed a bit much, but listened if only to enjoy the movement of her lips. And then she'd say, "You should stay in Boston just another week, Father. I don't like the idea of you traveling so soon. Why are you blushing?" Father Olafemi thanked her for her concern, but he felt fine. He hadn't expected to be anxious to leave, but he was. In part to get away from Nurse Chandler Jackson. She'd become infatuated with his long eyelashes and smooth skin, which she referenced continually. "Why are you blushing, Father Olafemi? You think I have a crush on you?" Interstate 90 was smoothly paved. The toasty cabin was a relief. Since the surgery, he developed a fear of shivering, and God seemed to have pinned each town down to the earth with half a dozen church spires. Father Olafemi leaned his head back and closed his eyes and imagined what welcome awaited him at his destination. The Catholic Diocese of Toledo had paid for his flight from Abuja to Boston, his surgery, the cost of his month-long convalescence, the walker, and the bus ticket to Alcestis, Ohio, where he'd agreed to preside for 3 years over the parish of a Father Crinkle. It was probably unhealthy to imagine what his welcomers would think. He was replacing a priest accused of molestation. He was as dark as could be, and from the photos he found on the internet, the people of Alcestis were as white as could be, and he'd arrive a cripple. At least this last bit would improve. He would heal. He was growing again. His pelvis was grafting to the rough textured backside of a titanium socket, perfectly sized to fit a titanium cap on the head of his femur. It would take months, but one day he'd stand at the pulpit and raise his arms, a man upright, his limbs deliriously functional, and proclaim, "This is the day of the Lord." The higher the bus traveled, the more snow had accumulated until there was not a speck of green out the windows. Flailing oaks and maples were left behind. Conifers stood stiff and apart like gentlemen. All the valleys and even a river 200 feet below a bridge were white, too cold for color. He'd not imagined this much snow on Mount Everest, much less in Pennsylvania, which he'd never imagined. He wrapped his arms in a green blanket from the hospital gift shop, feeling older than his 38 years, and stared at the road. Behind a gray scrim, the sun slipped below the horizon and left the twilight gloom so whole it was hard to imagine sunlight shining on other parts of the earth. The driver's bald pate darkened. His hands took a blue pallor from the lighted dashboard gauges. Father Olafemi eavesdropped now and then on the conversation of the young men across the aisle. The thick-faced one had just been released from Walpole State Penitentiary. His family had abandoned him, he said. He spoke softly. He didn't know if any of them would be waiting when the bus dropped him off, and he didn't blame them. His voice became more animated when he talked about the men he'd been forced to live with for 2 years. He spoke of a man named Caldwell, who begged the guards for antidepressants to help him sleep through his sentence. At night, Caldwell told stories about crimes and infidelities. He tried to steal a motorcycle by driving it off someone's porch, but didn't notice the chain connecting the motorcycle to a pipe. He woke in the yard, missing teeth, 2 policemen standing over him. He'd had sex with his girlfriend's mother, spun her like a top, he said, because her legs ended at the knees. The ex-convict laughed as he told the stories. The long-haired one responded with stories of his family. His mother had been a nurse in a nursing home just about her whole life. His father constantly lent money to people he shouldn't have. His sister had married a man despite the man's near-deafness. Whereas the ex-convict had spoken softly, almost intimately, the long-haired one spoke loudly of his family's stoicism and generosity. Father Olufemi knew the young man wanted him to hear. It was a common reaction to his caller. Thanks.